All right, welcome to the No Name Podcast. We're on episode 45. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully, you guys have started the journey of John, the book of John, the Gospel of John with us. We had part one broken out into 2 episodes. Again, we appreciate the questions, the comments. We're starting to put up the shorts, so hopefully people are doing that, looking at them, passing it along. But hit the like and subscribe button. That helps with the metrics of kind of pushing this out to others.
Algorithms.
So yeah, there you go. I was trying to figure out that. I was like the
algorithms. Yeah.
There you go. So others can hear it as well, and hopefully you guys will keep passing it along and being part of this. We'll be jumping into John chapter 2. We were kind of just talking here as we're going through this, just kind of things going on. We have quite a bit, start of the new year. So again, just hopefully you guys are coming along this journey and just keep asking questions and
like and subscribe and pass it along to people, man. That's the thing. We need you to pass it along to people, man, so that other people can be encouraged, because you just never know who you could, encourage with the words that we're trying to present to you.
And that's the other thing. Hopefully this is encouraging to you guys, because that's what it should be. This is all us growing together as we go through these Bible studies. We're learning it. We're learning more. I learn more every time I read it and stuff like that. So there's always different. There's always different applications to it.
Yeah.
You want to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I've been saying throughout the time that we started this. I believe this is a tool God gave us for evangelism. You can't go out to the streets, but you can pass it on to your friends. It's like giving out a flyer. Here's I would like for you to listen to this podcast.
Same
Hopefully
thing.
you like it.
Yep.
And then it's up to them if they choose to listen to it or not, but you did your part. And I believe that's very important, It's not about the numbers. I don't care about the numbers, and I don't think none of you do.
Yeah, none of us really care about that. Right.
Evangelism, reaching out, and they're not only reaching out, but you know what? Hopefully that this will help them grow, spiritually, and understand a little bit about the Bible, and because sometimes when we talk about this, like we're talking in John now, that people will start reading it, and then God deals with them and how the word comes to them. So hopefully they'll keep on. Just give it out to your friends, to your families. You never know. You never know who will touch. So. But
even beyond that, it's more also about being engaged in it. Like we said, we're doing this to create a community even outside of our church. So hopefully you guys get engaged with it. Ask questions and kind of go through. We're not always going to be right. Some of this is our opinion. Some of it is what we believe. We're going to disagree with each other up here as well. So again, hopefully you guys come along with that journey. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else to say about that piece. Should we jump into John chapter 2?
Yeah, let's get it. Yay.
So John chapter 2 is kind of interesting, and we were talking about this earlier on. It opens up with Jesus' first miracle. You're not going to find this one in the other Gospels. Again, like we said before, John kind of starts a little bit early than the other Gospels do. This is where more people get the timeline of Jesus being around for 3 years in his ministry. But you have John chapter 2 starts off with the water turning to wine. And I know when we're talking about this, it's always interesting, because I think this has become more of a focal point on debate in regards to
it's always about the wine,
alcohol, good or bad. And then we've already had conversations on that. But I don't think God put this in here for that focus. Like, I don't think he placed it in this part to say, okay, let me throw in something in there so people can debate about it. I think it was more of as if we believe all scripture is inspired by God, I think it was more the focus of the miracle and what was going on. So we're going to focus more on that on this one. If you want to hear our thoughts on it, on that, we've had it in other podcasts, so feel free to look at some of the other podcasts. But here's Jesus, and it's interesting. Like, this was not Jesus' plan to start his ministry.
Right.
Like, he did not come in and say, okay, my first miracle is going to be turning water into wine. He finds himself in a situation. Like, he's literally he's just picked out some of his disciples. I don't know if he has all of them, I don't think the Bible makes clear he's gone. If you go based on John in chapter 1, he's there. John chapter 1, that's why he broke it out into 2, goes through a lot. Like it goes through the Jesus back to the beginning of time. It goes to the John the Baptist, but then he has a couple of disciples, one of them being Nathaniel, who tells him nothing good comes from Nazareth.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden he's headed to a wedding. He's going to a wedding, and he's there.
Yeah, and his mother's like, we need some more wine.
Yeah. Like all of a sudden they're there. They're at this wedding, and a situation happens. Like it was not Jesus showing up and saying, okay, I'm here to do a miracle. He's literally just there. He's an invited guest.
Right.
He must have known the family, his mother as well. And so they're all there at this wedding, and all
Jesus
of a sudden,
and the disciples, right?
Yep, Jesus, his disciple, his mother, they're at this celebration, and the weddings at that time were very long. Like they were a week-long celebration. So you had a whole bunch going on. And then all of a sudden, Jesus' mother comes to him and says, hey, they're out of wine. And it's interesting through this whole piece of the scripture. One main thing that we find very interesting is the interaction between Jesus and his mom, verse 4 and 5, where he says, woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. Verse 5, his mother said to the servant, whatever he says to you, do it. And a lot of people,
I was gonna say, just start right there. So Jesus is actually telling his mother, like, look, it's not my time to perform this miracle right now. And then his mother's like, oh yeah, it is, basically. Do what he, you know what I mean? Like that's what it seemed like. It seemed like, oh no, you don't think it is, but it is. Go make some wine. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think she's there. She understands the situation. She knows, right? She knows who Jesus is.
Of course.
She knows the power Jesus has.
Of
course. There is no recorded previous miracles in this one. So there's nothing that says,
okay,
did he do something as a kid with just
because
Joseph
I'm pretty
and Mary?
sure that he did.
Did he do this and that?
It might not be recorded, but
it really doesn't say. Yeah, it doesn't tell us. But she knew, again, she had to know. She knew it was a miracle birth because she was the one proclaiming to be a virgin and have a virgin child.
Right.
But you have to, like we're talking about, you have to look at it and see it this way. Like Jesus has not hit the scene yet. People have either forgotten or just thought it was a lie of his birth, because no one's there saying he's just Jesus, the Joseph's carpenter's son, Mary's son. There's not anything more unique about him. That's all he is. He is now starting a ministry. He hasn't preached yet. He has a couple of disciples. Mm-hmm. Like literally his disciples are picked up by him talking to a few, and now he's at a wedding, and she comes and tells him. And if you study, I think sometimes we read it and we don't understand the concept of it because we're reading it. And that's what we're talking about. I always recommend like other books, or even like The Chosen. The Chosen's a good production to watch if you haven't seen it. I think it really brings the Bible alive. It also claims, like in the very beginning, this is not the Bible. Like this is not.
You need to go and read the Bible yourself.
Go read it on your own,
right?
But because they take a little bit of creative liberties to piece together based on history and knowledge, culture, and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't seen the Chosen, they're on season 3. I recommend it's a nice, gives you a little bit of picture of what's going on. But again, Jesus did not come like the way John the Baptist did and announce his ministry. Like he's keeping it very low key here. And so when his mother comes and tells him, I need you to perform this miracle, his first pushback is like, this is not my time. Because I don't think sometimes we understand, like, once this happens, this is the ripple effect that leads him to the cross. Like he knows, okay, once this happens, there's no turning back. There's no more, because people are going to hear about it. Sooner or later, they're going to hear about this miracle. There's going to be rumblings, and he knows that's what's going to happen. And she's asking him for this miracle, and he performs it. I think also it's interesting, the dynamic between Jesus and his mother, because his mother knows that he's still going to do it. And maybe there was more of an exchange there, right? We got to understand this was just a very summarized version of it. But the whole piece of it, I think sometimes this is where I think sometimes the Catholics take their response and other parts of, oh yeah, so he listened to Mary, right? He said no, but he still listened to her. So we'll ask Mary to plead on our behalfs and things like that. I'm not gonna say I'm a Catholic expert, so but I think this is one piece or one of the factors they use on that. But Jesus goes ahead, and what's interesting is if you read through this miracle, none of it is down out in the open. Like Jesus has, they have the servants bring it in. No one there knows they're out of wine, other than Mary, Jesus, and a couple of people. Because if they knew, that would have ruined the whole wedding. So Jesus tells the servants to bring this water, and then they serve it to the master of the ceremony.
Right?
He drinks it, and he makes his proclamation, right? That most people serve the best wine first, and then wait for the end, and then they give when no one else can. When it's towards the end, they just give out the junk, but they've done the opposite and given out the best. And the thing here is nowhere in there do you see where it says, oh yeah, well, Jesus turned the water into wine or this and that. This is purely done with just the servants and a few people knowing. And Jesus keeps it that way. And I think that's one of the key things here is like Jesus was being very low key with this. The only ones that knew what was going on were the people working in the background. This was not a proclamation to his ministry of saying, okay, everyone look at me, I'm turning, like he didn't stop the wedding ceremony and tell everyone, look at me, I'm turning water into wine. He just did it and moved on.
I don't know, man. I'm starting to think here right now. I'm just like, maybe this is just all a part of, what God planned, like all of it, for us to make us think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
well, I think there's a lot of symbolism to it.
You know what I'm saying, though?
Well, I think there's a lot of symbolism to it. If you look at it, I mean, throughout the Bible, wine is used as the blood.
Right.
I mean, this is a foreshadowing of Jesus there at the Passover, at the Last Supper, when he's sitting there and he's saying, drink this in remembrance of my blood. Because that was the whole thing. Like when they were doing the Passover, you have to remember the Passover celebration was a remembrance of the deliverance in Egypt. And so it was a passing over.
Passing over, right.
Yeah, and so it was the blood that was there at the, they would take the lamb and they would spread the blood on the door and then pass them over. And when he's doing this, sometimes I think a thing, and we'll get into it when we get later on, one of the things that we miss is like, we call it the Last Supper because it was Jesus' Last Supper. But honestly, it really was the last Passover because this was the Passover celebration of now Jesus is about to pour his blood. That's why he's claiming he's the lamb, like his blood's covering us so that we're passed over from our sins. We're redeemed, we're forgiven. And I think it's interesting that his first thing is wine, which he's going to later use to say, drink this in remembrance of me. Yep. And I think the other piece to this is also the part of even the there's a lot of symbolism in the bride and the bridegroom. We're constantly called the bridegroom of Christ. And then I think even the piece of the understanding of what the chief of ceremony says, like, hey, you waited for the
the best for last.
And if you look at it, Jesus does several references to this, but one that I look at is in the Jewish culture, they were so focused on the past. It was the, you had Moses, you had Abraham, Isaac, and there was no greater than Moses, and you had some of the prophets, but they were so focused on that, yet they couldn't see that the Messiah was sitting in front of them, right? Like once he starts making his proclamations and he starts seeing this, like that's what caused the uproar, because now you have Jesus here and they tell him like there's no way you're the one.
Yeah.
Like again, I hear echoing of Nathaniel saying of what good comes out of Nazareth. It's like, okay, the best of all of humanity is coming out of Nazareth.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing that happening and coming and manifesting itself there. And I just think it's just interesting when you look back at it and you say, okay, but more than anything, I think it was just a matter of, Jesus performing this miracle, but it wasn't out there for everyone.
Right.
Like nowhere in here does it say, okay, verse 11 says the beginning of the signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifest his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't say like all the people knew. And then after this, he just leaves. He goes down to Capernaum with his mother and his brother and his disciples, and they did not stay there many days. And that's all we hear about is they leave there and they go stay in Capernaum, and they're there, and you don't hear anything. Yeah. It's not like a mob happens. It's not like they're chasing them or anything.
Yeah.
That miracle was just for the people that were there, just for the servants. Like really, that's who got to see. Like the first people to see the miracle of God in the works was servants that were just there. And I think that's impressive. I heard someone say, there's a lot of people who get into like servant ministry. This is their whole thing. That they love this story because there's sometimes in serving God, you see a miracle in the background that others don't get to see. And I think that's impressive. I think it's a good call out there, and it's kind of interesting. But just the symbolism of it and what was going on, and this is kind of his first miracle.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, man. So then what? You got anything you want to input on that, Pop Dukes?
No, I mean, it's weird that in verse 11, the disciples were barely with him. I don't think they were with him that long when this happened. And it says that his glory, Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. That means they still had doubts in who he was.
Because his disciples, they got to see the miracle too, though, right? I mean, so you got all of these people at this wedding, and then Jesus performs this miracle, and like you said, it was just for those people at the time, and his disciples, they actually got to see it too.
Well, I think that's part of it too. Like, I think as we read through John and you read through the Gospels, I think it's foolish for us to think the moment that Jesus called the disciples that they knew he was the Messiah.
Oh yeah, no way.
They just knew him as a good rabbi. They learn about it as he's going through, because if you look at it later on when they're in the boat, and Peter tells them, like, you are the Messiah, you are the one, and he says that was only revealed to you by the Spirit. Like, you come to realize, like, they're starting to piece it together, but they still have their doubts, and it's not 100% sure. They know they trust him enough to be a rabbi. They trust him enough to follow him, but I don't know if they've been completely sold on, okay, he's the Messiah. And again, prior to this, he hasn't done a miracle yet.
Right.
The only thing that we know of is he's called the disciples. The only thing we know of is if they were there, which we're not sure if they were there, but if some of them were there during the baptizing from John the Baptist, the Bible says, God spoke audibly. Now, I don't know. It's from what I remember, everyone heard who were there that this is my son who I'm well pleased in. Right. So again, to Pastor's point, is kind of like, it says they began to believe because they were starting to see the miracles, right? That Jesus, at least not up until this point, when he's calling them, has he told them, I'm the Messiah? He, in other versions, he just tells them, come with me and I'm going to make you fisher of men. He does it.
He didn't tell them exactly. I don't know, man. There's a scripture that's, I can't remember it though. I think it's like Corinthians or something that say like, you will know something about the Holy Spirit. You just said it.
You know me by my spirit.
Yeah. Oh man.
But
so maybe, you know what I'm saying? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I think again, you see the evolution of the disciples throughout. I think that's why it's good to see the gospel, because I think sometimes when we look at the disciples, we think that they were 100% sure they were this and that, and I think that's what we think too. Is like we get saved, we're supposed to be 100% sure about everything, and I think the journey and the relationship with God is building that confidence and getting to know Him and getting to know Him better. And as they got to know, because they spent years with him, and
Right.
even at the crucifixion, they didn't
They
understand
still-
what was going on.
Right, they still didn't.
So there's this concept that sometimes is a misconception that you have to be 100% perfect the moment that God called you, and that's not
That's
the
not gonna
case.
happen.
It's
Yeah.
a growing relationship, and I think you're going to see that through the disciples throughout
Well,
the time.
I think it's just like anything in life. I mean, you know, people come to church, they get saved, God does a miracle in their life, touch their life, and you know, at the beginning they start believing in the church and the pastor and the leaders and everything, you know,
Right.
how God's moving, all that. But then if they stick around as Christians, you find out that you're gonna go through doubts. You're gonna go through, you know,
Definitely.
unbelief. You're gonna
Yep.
go through things, especially when things start happening personal in your life, or you know, people don't always agree the way the church is doing things and this and that, and that's where, you know, sometimes God has to do something to make us realize, you know what, this is me. This is what I'm doing. You know, I'm doing this. You know, and I believe that's what happened here, because he just went to the wedding. You know, he wasn't there to preach, to teach.
No, right.
He was there to
went
fellowship,
right.
to-
He went as a person
Yeah.
to enjoy the festivities.
Yeah.
Right.
And the mom is the one that asked him to do, you know, a miracle.
Well, I think to that's kind of the thing on. It's what happens when you're focused on the miracle. When we and we all come to God for different reasons, and
Right.
different things. But if we don't build a relationship with Him, then it all disappears. And that's the thing. Like a lot of times, I think that's why He kept this so private. And he kept a lot of the miracles private in the beginning. Then the people started spreading it out. But if you see, he rarely goes and says, "This is the miracle I performed." He performs a miracle and he tells people, "Keep it to yourself. Don't say anything."
Yeah.
Why? Because people get focused on the miracle.
A miracle. Yeah.
A lot of times when we come to church or we come to having a relationship,
totally
to come
agree.
to here, we're so focused on the miracle that
Yeah.
we want it. Oh, God, heal us from this.
Yep.
God, save me from
Yep.
this. God, do this. God, do that. Though the greatest miracle of all already happened. Like He's already redeemed everyone's sin. Like it happened. Like the redemption of your sin
Yeah.
doesn't happen the moment that you pray about it. It's already happened.
already happened.
It's when you pray about it, it's that you're accepting.
You accept
you're
it.
accepting
Yeah.
something that's already been there.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it and all your focus is on is the miracle, to your point, when the next miracle doesn't happen, now your relationship starts falling apart. And you see that even in the disciples. Like there's times where they're like, I think that was one of their biggest heartaches when Jesus died, right? Because as Jesus is alive, they're being fed. They're seeing Him walk on water. They're seeing the sick and the dead heal. They, for a moment, have a power when He sends them out by twos. They, for a moment, have a power to heal and cast out demons and do all these things. And then all of a sudden, He's gone, and they think, oh no, the miracles are gone. Oh no, our Messiah is gone. Oh no, the revolution we were expecting to happen is gone. And they realized, they began to realize this is a bigger thing that He's talking about. It was not God against, and I think that's why He kept it quiet. Like that's one of the things you're going to see in the concept of the Gospels in the beginning. His focus was not fighting the Roman Empire. That's what the Jewish
they
wanted.
thought.
That's what
Yeah.
the Jewish wanted. They
Yeah.
wanted Him to come and focus
That's what
on
they
the Roman
thought.
Empire.
Yeah.
His focus was on, from the beginning of time, is fighting sin, evil, fighting, redeeming people.
Yeah.
Like that's been the focus from the moment Adam and Eve sinned in the
Yeah.
Garden of Eden, and even as God made His proclamation there, the whole focus has been on redeeming humanity. It was, but not from a certain empire or any of that sort. It was from our sins, from death, from what we brought into this world. You know, I mean, and I say we brought sin into this world. I think the devil was already around, but we brought sin into humanity the moment we accepted that,
Yeah.
and we went away from God. And I think that's what we see there. And then from there, Jesus goes to the temple. Like it says, He goes to Capernaum. He stops, and He goes to the temple. And I find it very interesting. So He shows up in the temple. He sees they're selling sheep, ox, and doves, the money changers, and they're doing business in a certain part of the temple. I guess they hadn't normally done. Then all of a sudden He comes in, and he drives them all out. And he says, take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandisers. And the people get upset. And so we see that going on. And I find it very interesting, like that he comes in and, I mean, I understand the concept. I understand the preaching, but it's funny that this is a point where he gets stirred up.
Yeah, he's actually mad.
But again, I think it's because he's performed, my opinion, he's performed the miracle. He's starting his ministry. And so now it's time to confront the people. See, and again, this was the misconception. Like, if you read it, they even talk about it. It says in 17, then his disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house has eaten me up.
Yeah.
What they're going back is they're remembering Old Testament prophecies of the Messiah. And where they thought that the Messiah was coming to fight against Rome and the oppressors, when you start reading some of the Messianic prophecies, he was supposed to be cleansing and refining what was going on. And so right here, he's not just confronting the Pharisees and the Sadducees and those in the temple. He's confronting everybody on their thought process of the temple and what's going on. And so I find it interesting that he's now starting his ministry because Jesus was a Jew. He grew up in, if you read the Bible, he lived in Nazareth. He went around. He's probably gone to the temple before. This is not the first time he's seen the merchandise.
Oh,
it was not like but this is now the first time he's going to address it.
Yeah.
Like he's seen this going. He's been on the earth about 30 years already from what we can try to piece together. And now he says, okay, now's my time to address it. And he's addressing it with the people. And I think it was more of the whole thing of the Passover. And I think it was a mixture of things. Like everyone focuses on the money part of this. Okay, he was throwing the money. They were selling in the church. They were or the temple at the time, and they were doing this and that. But what led to the custom of this, right? Like the whole point of the Passover was a celebration of what God did. And so I think when that celebration started off, the focus on it was, okay, you go get your best ox or whatever, and you sacrifice in remembrance of the sins and what God had done, and you do that. But it's just like anything, celebrations and remembrance can become routine. And when it becomes routine, you start looking for the shortcuts. So when it first starts off, you're looking at it and you're finding the best ox and you're saying, okay, God, and it's about the ceremony and the thing of you and God together. But then it turns into a thing of more of just, okay, I just need to get this done. So it's easier for me to go somewhere there, buy it. And now someone saw an opportunity. So now they're selling it. Because I tell you, if you were bringing your own oxen, if you were bringing your own doves, if you're bringing your own things, there would have been no reason to have merchandise there.
Right.
Yeah, supply and demand.
Right.
So you created this because now all of a sudden the value of it. And that's the same thing. It's like sometimes with church, with other things, we take something that should be good and we make it so ritual and so routine that we lose the value in it.
So let me ask, so you think this was like obviously, like you said, Jesus has been to the temple many times and, he's seen many things. So you think this was like a build up?
Yeah.
And like, Jesus is like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this. Like, you guys are making a mockery of my dad's house. Like, he just got tired of it.
Well, yeah. And I think that's, I think, I don't know if it was that he got tired of it. I'm sure he was tired of it from before. I think it was more of, again, I think the moment, that's why I think he pushed back on Mary, which for me echoes more of why he says, my hour has not yet come. Because the moment he started performing miracles, now's the moment that he starts, because he knows you have to, if you look at the whole story of Jesus, the miracles brought attention.
Of course.
And Jesus wasn't going to lie.
Of course.
But the attention brought the questions.
Yeah, of course.
But the questions brought his answers, which now he's
people didn't like his answers though.
But that's what I mean. Before that, why didn't they go and try to kill Jesus before? Yeah, you have Herod who hears, oh, the king of the Jews is born, tries to go kill him. Once they're done, he goes to Egypt, comes back. Jesus is probably about 12 or 13 when he goes to the temple.
Yeah.
They marvel at what he says. But then it goes quiet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what happened to that pursuit? I mean,
It goes quiet for 17 years. Why didn't they kill Jesus? Because they saw him as a nobody. He wasn't out performing miracles. He wasn't out disrupting things. He wasn't out doing any of this. The moment the miracles and the disruption starts happening, what's the first thing they want to do is kill him. They want him out of the way. And so I think when you look at it and you see, okay, when he tells his mother, my hour has not yet come, but he still does the miracle, now you see the marking of it. Okay, now the ministry's starting. His time has come. He's starting to do this. So guess what his first thing to do? Jesus' first thing was to address the religion of that time. He was not worried about the Roman Empire. He was worried about the Jews and how they were interpreting God's love. Their interpretation of God's love was you just go buy an ox, and you go and you go and sacrifice it, and and there's your love for God.
Yeah,
and it's like it's like anything. Like we always compare it to relationships and marriage and stuff like that. And sometimes I like the comparison, sometimes I don't. Because I say that with the preferences because I've said this several times on there. But it's like if you're married or something and you're doing something for your wife, and when you do it out of if you just do it out of routine, I mean, if you do it and it's something unique, all of a sudden it makes it something special. But then I'm trying to find a good example. It's almost like, let's say like if you go and you bought her flowers one day out of nowhere. That first time you give it to her, she's like, "Oh wow, right. This is fantastic. I wasn't expecting it."
But if you do it again, then
then if you say, "Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna send her flowers every day if this is the reaction," so you just put it on auto pay and you have flowers delivered every day. There's no effort or anything into it.
Yeah, nah.
All of a sudden, after some time, it becomes like. Yeah. And some people may debate that. Again, I'm not gonna say this is the most solid example, but that's what I'm saying. When it becomes routine and it loses its part of it, and then you forget. And I think that's what Jesus was partially starting to address here, because it was so routine that no one saw an issue with it. Maybe others had gone into the temple and addressed this, but you see Jesus coming in and he's saying, okay, you have, the doves, and you're selling this to these people. One, you're making it easier for them to not go, because there was a whole journey to it, right? If you're going to go pick out the ox, you're going to go pick out the dove or whatever you could afford and whatever you're supposed to bring in, it was all about the heart. Yeah. And it was about taking that time to go and find the best, and then there's sacrifice to it, because you're like, man, this is my best ox. I could be getting this money, but I'm going to give it up because I know God's going to take care of it. And there was none of that. Now you're just going to the thing. You're going to there, and you're trusting the person there has a good ox. Yeah, you're trusting that it's the right one, and you're like, okay, I'm paying for it, and then I'm going in.
And that's what a lot of commentaries believe, that Jesus wasn't mad because they were selling. It's because, you know what, them too, they knew the law. They knew that they had to sell clean animals, for them to sacrifice. So they were bringing on unclean animals and selling them, because they just wanted to make money. That's why he said, do not turn my house into a merchandise. Because this is where a lot of people get it. Yeah. Oh, you're not supposed to say, you're not supposed to do this. But he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about, you know what, you're making it into a store, my house now. And not so much you're trying to help the ministry, you're trying to do this for the... But
you're doing it for yourself.
You want to make money, so you don't care. Instead of selling the good oxes, the good sheeps and all that, you're bringing the bad ones. Yeah. And pawning it off to the people. Yeah. And then the people should know better if they were clean or not clean. And that's what happens. Just like us. That's why I've always said, when you come to church, the church is like a hospital. You're going to come unclean, regardless if you're a Christian or not, because we sin, we're in this world and all that. And then we're here, the presence of God, the blood of Christ. And not only here, but at your house, wherever you're at. God can cleanse you, from everything, And he's the sacrifice, He's the last sacrifice that was performed. And all we have to do now is just ask for forgiveness, and he comes and cleanses us from whatever we're going through, And I believe that's why Jesus was mad, because you know what? They were going to church, but not for the right reasons. Yeah. Even though they were celebrating the Passover, Now they took it more like when we have fiesta here, you know, people go and celebrate and all that, you know, and that's the, you know, it's
and I think that's part. I think that's where you have to keep that. You know, I think Jesus it talks about it in Revelations, the first love, and I think that's where it comes back to, like, having that relationship with God and keeping it renewed and close. Because when you do, then it doesn't become routine, and when it becomes routine, then you have all of this. And if you look at it, it's interesting, because then the response to Jesus is basically, who are you? Like, what signs have you done that, like, who are you that you can come and do all of this?
Yeah.
And Jesus' answer to them is very interesting, which, quite honestly, if I was sitting there, I'd be saying the same thing, like, you're nuts. Because he destroyed this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it back up. Yeah. Now, again, at that time, you're standing at a temple. I don't know if he's speaking about his body or he's actually speaking of the temple. Maybe he pointed to his body. I have no idea.
Right. But you don't know.
But the Jews are like, they're looking at it and they're like, it's taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days. And again, when they look back at it, they're talking about, like, okay, you know what? He was talking about his body, because again, if you go back, again, Jesus was trying to make them understand the focus of it. I don't think it was just about destroying the temple and stuff like that, and it just being focused on his body. I think it was, but it was also a focus on getting away from just looking at the building. Because again, they were so focused on the building. Like, the moment Jesus addresses some things, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're going to destroy this temple. It took us 46 years to rebuild it after being cast out and after all these things that happened. And he was referring to his body, because the true temple is our body.
Our body, right?
That's where God dwells, is in our body, you know? And I think it's just interesting that was Jesus' kind of focus there. He's just really focusing on, here's the main piece of it. And it does happen, like they say, like, he dies and he raises 3 days later. But the focus on him, bringing that focus onto the body, that's the temple. Again, here he is, he's readdressing the relationship of God and humanity. And it's not a new concept. If you go back to the Old Testament, you're going to see it. God never asked for a temple. Temples were all man-made. God never asked for a tabernacle. That was man-made. Yeah. All God ever wanted to do was dwell with his people.
Yeah.
And that's what he's always, like, from the beginning of time. Adam and Eve never even thought of building them a temple. Why? Because God walked in the garden with them.
Hello.
And previous to Adam, how come no one else thought about it? It wasn't until Moses that they were like,
we need a temple.
We need a tabernacle. We need somewhere for you to dwell, God. You know why? My opinion is because when they went to Egypt, God was always with them, but they didn't hear him, right? Jacob, Isaac, Abraham are hearing from God. And it's like God goes silent for 40 years. And then all of a sudden he speaks to Moses. And so guess what? When you feel like someone's abandoned you and they come back, guess what their first thing? I want to make sure you never leave again.
Yeah, I want to make
so
sure
guess
you
what?
stay around.
Guess what I want? I'm gonna build you a place so you can dwell, so you never
stay
leave.
Here. Yeah.
And that was God was never, but God didn't leave them in those 40 years. He was still there with them. They just maybe weren't hearing them audibly. It's just like even now, we may not always hear the audible voice of God, but it doesn't mean that God's not with us. He's constantly dwelling with us, and I think Jesus presenting that concept already in the beginning, right? Like, he's trying to make them understand the relationship. Like, it goes beyond just the temple, the merchandising. Like, it goes beyond all of that. Like, it's just so interesting on his concept of it. And then I think it's interesting. Chapter 2 closes out, and he's there, and they're celebrating the Passover. He performs some signs. But I find the last two scriptures very interesting. But Jesus did not commit himself to them, because he knew all men, and had no need that anyone should testify of man, for he knew what was in man. So all of a sudden he's doing these signs, but he didn't commit himself to them. In other words, I think they were trying to make him almost like a king, because he's doing these miracles, right? They say, what signs? Now all of a sudden you hear and you don't get what signs he was doing. And John will clearly say at the very end, like, there's a whole bunch of miracles that Jesus did that that no one knows and would fill a book that would fill this whole universe of all the things he did. But he was doing some kind of signs here that now all of a sudden the people want to commit to him, but he doesn't commit to the people. He says, because he knew their hearts. Why? Because I believe their understanding of the Messiah. They kept looking at him and they wanted him to be a king. Understand. They wanted him to fight. Yeah. They didn't want him to disrupt their religion. They didn't want him to disrupt the relationship they had with God. They just wanted him to be the Messiah in their thought process, come and take over the Roman Empire, set us up in a good place, and now we'll all be good. Yeah. And I think that's why when he knew their hearts, he wasn't ready to commit to them.
Yeah.
Because he had a bigger purpose. His purpose was way bigger.
Definitely.
I think that's one of the things with the Gospels and following the life of Jesus. Like, his life is way bigger and his concepts are way more. And I think and that's the weird thing about this. We have the Bible. We get to read it and see all of this, and we get to look at it in the past. And sometimes we look and we wonder, how did the disciples miss it? But I think sometimes we miss that concept too. Like, we're here, we're still missing that concept at times of the relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Jesus' love for us, God's love for us, and really what his focus was. Like, they thought the Messiah was going to come and be this military leader to save them from Rome or whatever oppressor they were in at the time. And when Jesus shows up, that's not what he is. And I think sometimes we think the same thing. We think Jesus is coming in just to heal us from all our things and make us perfect people, good people, and life's going to be good. And when that concept of Jesus starts falling apart, then we don't know who he is. Because again, a lot of times we're coming to him and we're asking for these things, and he heals us from it. But if we're not changing our ways, like if you notice, every time Jesus was doing a miracle that he actually records, or he's healing someone, it wasn't just about healing them. It was about forgiving their sins and telling them, go and sin no more. Yeah. But then it was also about building a relationship, like helping them understand their relationship with God and stuff like that. And I think that's why, like, again, right here, you see Jesus, he performs signs. When they say signs, I'm assuming he has to be doing some kind of miracles. Mm-hmm. I don't think he was flying on clouds or just always walking on water. Mm-hmm. Like, he was doing some kind of miracles that they're seeing. But again, they were so focused on the miracle and saying, wow, look what he's doing. Look at this and that. They were missing the bigger picture. And I think that's why Jesus keeps his ministry low key. Like, you're going to see him. He has nowhere in here. And I could be wrong, but go back and read. Nowhere in here has Jesus stated, I am the Son of God. Nowhere in the first two chapters has he said, let me be clear, I'm talking about the first two chapters. Mm-hmm. Up until this point, nowhere has he said, I am the Son of God, I am this, I am that. Mm-hmm. He has not made any bold statements.
No proclamations. That's right.
He doesn't. And you'll see as you start reading it, it's a while before he makes that claim. Because he's keeping his ministry low key because he doesn't want them focused. He knows they're going to get focused on the miracles and miss the bigger picture of who he is. And I think he's trying to get his disciples to focus on that too. Who he is, not on the miracles, not on what he can do and things like that. And I think that's the same thing with us. Like, sometimes we get so focused on the miracles and stuff that we get lost in who God really is. Like, he is a miracle worker, he is a way maker, he's all of these things. But beyond that, even if he doesn't change our circumstance, even if he doesn't pull us out,
he's still who he is. Yeah.
He's still there with us, loving us and helping us through it.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes the concept that, like, honestly, what would have happened if, like, would it have made Jesus less of Jesus if he went to this wedding and he didn't turn the water into wine?
No. He still would have been.
Still would have been who he was. Yeah. But again, it's not, we can get focused on the miracles and forget who he is. And his true purpose on here, which was to be our redemption.
Yeah.
That's John chapter 2, unless you have anything else to add?
No,
not really.
All right. Well, then, with that, again, hopefully you guys are enjoying the episodes. Hit the like and subscribe button, and then we'll be back with John chapter 3. Thanks.